Today, we're talking about Facebook compliance, how you can prevent yourself from getting your ad account disabled, your business manager disabled, and all your ads getting rejected. This is one of the ones that you should know. I'm going to give you the building blocks and the rules around Facebook advertising, something that I'll update every single week so you know the rules of the road every time you create an ad so that you follow Facebook's policies, you keep your ad account in good shape, and you know exactly how to put out ads that get consistent leads along the way. So it's the first time joining one of my lives. I'm Brian Czekanski, better known as the Mom Copywriter, because I focus on coaches and businesses that focus on moms as their audience. So this is one of the stories that I put out today. Again, like one of my almost 4-year-old daughter started to use some profane language that I assume that she learned at school. So as a parent, I'm kind of learning the rules of the road in terms of how to, potentially combat that. At this time, I'm kind of, just kind of laughing at it more than anything else. But my wife is certainly concerned about what it might grow into along the way. And you can certainly see how Facebook is kind of like the parent of the community as well, using compliance and rules that are kind of ever evolving to make sure that everybody is having a great experience every time they get into the news feed, but that they're also getting some ad revenue from all those other marketers that are looking to have access to their network. So, again, the compliance aspect is something that is completely changing, almost on a daily basis, on a weekly basis. The rules that they have in place now, a year ago or several years ago, weren't as much of a focus or a concern, but it's just kind of a product of as the network has gotten bigger, as more and more marketers have kind of joined the news feed, as kind of the acclaims have increased, as the language has gotten more persuasive, and as people put out more and more claims out there that are some are substantiated, some are not. Facebook has had to crack down, particularly in certain industries, to make sure that, again, everybody on their platform gets a great user experience, that there's not as much faulty marketing or kind of selling products that aren't legitimate along the way. So what I'm going to do is kind of give you, again, kind of as you go about putting together your ad for the first time or thinking about the ads that are running currently, I'm going to give you the rules of the road just in terms of the process, what, some things to think about. And each week I'm going to dig a little bit deeper. So this is kind of at a 30,000 square foot view at this point. I'm going to make it kind of very broad. I'm going to cover some of the broad areas, and then each week I'll kind of dig in a little bit more into specific areas, certain industries, as I'm running ads, within some of those, to give you some of the best practices, so that you have a good idea and have some examples of what is going out there. So first part, in terms of the ad approval process, just so you know, if you haven't run an ad before, like what is it all about? The first part is, anytime you create an ad within Business Manager, and again, if you've never done it for the first time, I'll put a link. If you're watching the replay, I'll send you a link up at the top here that kind of just shows you how to do that step by step. I did a video last week that actually showed you how to do that. If you're doing it for the first time, or haven't done it in a while, or maybe you hired somebody before and you're doing it for your business now, as you put in that copy and as you hit that final publish button and it goes to Facebook, that first step is there's kind of a, Facebook uses artificial intelligence. So it's an artificial intelligence bot is kind of the first step in terms of who that first person is going to, not that first person, but that first robot that's going to actually go through your ad copy word for word. It's going to take a look at your image, and that's going to flag certain words and phrases and things like that might potentially get your ad disapproved. And if it does get disapproved or rejected, as they say, you'll get an email that says your ad has been rejected for some section within their within Facebook's ad policies. And they won't tell you in specifics like what word or what phrase or what image triggered that that rejection. But you do have the ability, if you look at your ad and you know the policies you're following each week in terms of my lives, in terms of the compliance aspect, it looks all great. And again, this is happening more and more as more and more people are putting ads out there, and as their AI is still getting up to speed on what is The AI can only has so many capabilities in looking at the words and phrases, and it's going to be very conservative in what it rejects and what it accepts. If anything, it's going to be more conservative on just rejecting things that seem a little bit off. So just realize that you're going to have ads that are disapproved, and you're going to look at it and say, like, I didn't do anything wrong here. I'm following all the rules, and that's perfectly fine. So Facebook gives you that manual review, like an appeal, anytime that you want to do that. And what that appeal does, it'll go to an actual human who will take a look at your ad, and that person will either accept and push your ad through, or they'll agree with the AI and say, like, okay, there's something that's a little bit off here, and your ad will continue to not run. It'll continue to be rejected there. So what you have to do is actually go into the ad, take a look at their suggestions, and figure out, make some edits in terms of your headline, your image, your copy. Take out any of those potential words or phrases that might be triggering that AI to reject it. And then you hit that publish button again, and it goes through the same process. So anytime you're editing your ad or make any kind of changes whatsoever, one of those things is it's going to go through the whole process. The AI is going to take a look at it again. If it does get rejected, you'll get that potentially another manual review. One of the key suggestions that I have is, if you go through the process and one of your ads does get rejected by that AI filter, and you go through an appeal and it gets approved by that human, is don't make any changes to that. If you want to make any changes to it, duplicate it and create a brand new ad. The reason is if you do that edit again and it goes through that same AI filter, it's probably going to get rejected again, but you might not get a potential appeal because you already went through that appeals process. I've seen that happen in ads that I've done, where you don't get that kind of you don't get a second appeal on the same ad. And it's likely that your ad is going to get rejected because, again, it's going through that AI process as well. So if you get an ad that's rejected and you do an appeal and it gets an approved, again, if you want to make any edits to that, just turn off that ad, duplicate it, and create a brand new ad, and that'll put you in better shape and kind of reset that appeal process as well as you go through. So that's just one thing to kind of keep in mind as you're going through that process. What I'm hearing more and more is people's ad accounts are getting disabled, business accounts are getting disabled. So the first thing that you should be and recognize is, if you do get one of your ads rejected, what you should do is go into them and make changes and kind of make it as plain vanilla as possible, so that you can go through and actually get accepted. So you don't want to have any rejected ads sitting in your business manager for any length of time. You want to be able to go in, and even if you're not going to run the ad, set it for a date in the future to run, and then just turn it off. But you want it to go through that process of the AI going through it, a manual appeal going through that. And that way, all the ads within your business manager are shown as approved. You don't want things to be rejected, because that kind of shows, like, whether you know it or not, because Facebook kind of has a score on your ad account based on like how often are you following the rules or not. So if they show a bunch of different ads rejected within your account, that kind of doesn't really help your scores. So just making sure that all your ads at any given time are approved, that's really helpful. And realize that if you get a bunch of ads that are rejected, kind of one after another, one of the things that you should be aware of, if you put up an ad and it gets rejected, don't just immediately duplicate it and put it in again. Like, you're likely to get rejected again, and the amount of times that you get rejected, particularly within a short amount of time, if you get a bunch of rejected ads, especially for the same reason or the same flag that the AI put out, that's when you're likely to get your ad account shut down. That's where you're likely to get your business manager shut down, because Facebook is kind of viewing it as like, you're not following our rules, and it looks like you're just trying to push these things through. So we don't really want you on our network, or it kind of just slows the process down. Like, we don't want you sending all these ads that are likely to get rejected. We're going to just shut you down, kind of take a breather, and do it that way. So again, if you wake up one day and your ad account does get, if you get the notice that your ad account got shut down, I'm hearing more and more of that. Again, the AI is kind of controlling that process. Even if you don't have any rejected ads, just know that there is an appeals process, just like the ads, that you can go through. Send them a nice, courteous, use, very nice language. You don't have to, this is going to go to a human. So just make sure that you are very, authentic and genuine with them, and don't even if you are angry or anything like that, and even if it's affecting your business, just be like, use the language and be kind in sending that appeal. And a lot of times, if there's no underlying problems, you'll get your ad account back or business manager back along the way. So just keep an idea, keep that in mind. Again, we want to make sure that we're kind of limiting the amount of ads being rejected, because that's going to lead to the healthier business manager being out there. One of the other things as well is, like, as you advertise, make sure that you set up backup accounts. So again, this is an easy way. For whatever reason, again, it might be just for no reason at all, your ad account gets shut down, at least you have a second account where you can get up and running again, run some ads, and do it that way. So that's one of the first things that I work on with my clients, making sure that we have our backup accounts, make sure that your pixel data is being shared with that backup account as well, so that in the kind of worst case scenario, you wake up and one of your ad accounts is shut down, you can kind of continue business as usual and kind of set up those ads in that way as well. So the other thing to realize before I kind of get into some slides and get into a little bit more detail is realize that the AI and Facebook is not only looking at your ad copy, but if you're running conversion ad or traffic ad or anything that takes that person off of Facebook, they're going to look at that landing page as well. So not only your ad copy, but your landing page have to follow Facebook's rules. And this is where a lot of times people get into trouble, in that they look at their ad and they say, like, I'm following the rules, but then you look at their landing page and they're, you're kind of using claims or headlines that really don't fit within Facebook's rules whatsoever. So just make sure that you are looking at your ad for that compliance, but also your landing page, and that's where you'll be in the best shape possible. So what I'm going to do is just share my screen for a little bit. I'm just going to go through a bunch of different slides that kind of just cover a various different areas in terms of the compliance here. So just a second. Okay. So again, Facebook Compliance 101 in terms of looking at that ad copy, but the landing page, again, make sure that people aren't going from an ad copy where you're all following the rules, and then you get to the landing page, and that's where you have kind of this headline that calls out the audience and kind of tries to do a lot of direct response copywriting that just isn't allowed within Facebook's compliance rules. Again, I covered the ad approval process. Again, realize that anytime you make any changes to those ads whatsoever, whether it's the image, the copy, anything like that, if you change up the landing page as well, it's going to start the whole process from zero. So the AI is going to take a look at that. Again, if they reject that there, one of those things. So again, like, just be aware if one of your ads does get rejected, the easiest thing to do if you get that approved is to just start a brand new ad whatsoever. Don't edit within an ad that had any history of getting rejected whatsoever. So next page that I'll go through is just common mistakes. So if we kind of go through, one of the things that you should be aware of, and these are kind of the key things that will kind of keep you out of hot water, and kind of the things that I see most often as I kind of look at copy and anytime somebody's in trouble, is number one, like, and this is relatively new, is like really calling out your audience's personal characteristics. So, anytime you create a Facebook ad, you're obviously targeting maybe a specific audience that you have for your company or your business. And just because you're targeting them doesn't mean within your ad copy that you can be really specific and say, like, hey, hey, coach, or like whatever it is. Personal characteristics can be their profession, their area of business, but it also can be gender, it could be race, all those kind of things. We don't want to be calling out or giving any perception that what that underlying person's personal characteristics is. So just because you're using targeting doesn't mean you can use that to your advantage within the ad copy. Like, this is something that was allowed a couple of years ago. You'd see a lot of ads that say, hey, attention coaches, consultants, those kind of things at the very top to kind of call out the audience and make it most relevant. But I'm seeing more and more that those type of ads aren't like possible anymore. You might see some people that have some of those ads that are still showing that, But I can tell you it's just a matter of Facebook kind of cracking down on them and eventually rejecting them as well. The other thing in terms of to mention, just to go back to the ad approval process, is just because your ad got approved and it's running doesn't mean that Facebook can't come back and shut it down and reject it over time. So it might be, again, especially as the rules change, you definitely have those older ads that have been running for a long period of time. As the rules have changed, that's where they're kind of rejecting an ad. So you might have started an ad a year ago and it was working perfectly fine for a year, was getting lots of leads, but then the Facebook rules change and they can come back and reject that ad. So don't take that initial approval as like you're home free and that kind of thing. As the rules change, you have to go back to some of your older ads and just make sure that it is following kind of the evolution of the rules that is out there along the way and doing that. And same thing, like if you say competitors ads that are out there and it seems like they're breaking the rules, and I kind of see it a lot of the time where you're just like, I don't know how that ad copy got approved. Just because you're seeing it somewhere else doesn't mean that it's kind of like it's full approval that you can start using it in your ads as well. Again, it might be a matter of time before their ads get disapproved. It just hasn't happened yet as kind of Facebook goes the backlog and kind of does that analysis on a constant basis. So again, just because some of your competitors or peers are using some of the things that look to go against the rules, don't take that as like, okay, it seems like that's a loophole that I can use. It's ultimately going to come back to bite you at the end of the day. And one of the things in terms of like calling out your audience, and we'll see this a little bit more in terms of the future slides, is really using claims, is really being careful when you use the word you. So anytime you use the word you, it should never be attached to anything really negative whatsoever. So don't when we talked about this a few days ago, and I mentioned it in terms of using story-based copy. But what you want to do is, especially when you're talking directly to your audience, is not giving them any kind of negative words around that. It could be their imperfections or problems that they're dealing with right now. You don't want to directly call out their problems, and you're not really, you're not able to do that within Facebook because, again, take it from Facebook's perspective. They want each user to have a positive experience. So if you're calling out their problems, their issues, that's not going to make them feel good. So, never use that you and any kind of negative connotation or negative problem or issue along the way. If you want to do that, be a lot more indirect, use testimonials, use your stories, your own story to kind of connect with your audience as much as possible. Again, I'll provide a link up above if you're watching the replay where I go through that in a little bit more detail a few days ago. Second thing is, and this is kind of a change as well, like using profane and insulting language. So again, curse words are something that were maybe allowed a couple of years ago, but Facebook has no tolerance for it right now. Again, same thing with insulting language or anything perceived as potentially negative. I'll give you an example. Like, more recently in the last few weeks, one of my clients had the word killer in her ad or headline. And what she meant by killer was just kind of like a mistake that was going on within that specific industry. But the ad just got rejected, or, in one instance, they let the ad run, but the CPM was so high because, it was kind of on the borderline of compliance. So again, using any kind of perceived negative language or insulting language or profanity, even if you put, kind of little symbols in between those curse words, Facebook has the ability through its AI to kind of recognize that. So don't try and skirt around the rules by doing it that way. You're ultimately going to get your ad rejected, even if it doesn't happen initially. Ultimately, they're going to come back and doing that. And then the final, within the common mistakes, always thinking about what claims you're making. Again, if you have you plus a claim, you have to really be able to back that up and substantiate that within your copy as much as possible. More than not, you're just not going to be able to make the type of claims that are out there. So again, certain industries, this is a little bit more, they're not as, I guess there's certain industries where they're a lot more strict. So number one would be certainly the weight loss industry. So if you're making certain claims around weight loss and certainly using like direct response copywriting within weight loss ads, you're going to be, severely restricted in terms of certain words you can use and what claims you can make and what benefit statements you can put out there. So just be really careful. Again, it's by industry where, like, again, there's not a list of words that you can't use. I wish there was, but there's just certain words and phrases that are always going to be flagged by the AI. And that's how your ads are going to get rejected. So really thinking clearly about, like, anytime I say you, is there a specific claim attached to that within that same sentence or within that same phrase, and just really being careful around that. And if anything, you kind of really have to water down your language. This is not something where you can do like your regular sales page and you can put out a headline trying to catch people's attention. You have to really go indirectly. Again, that's why using stories is a better way of doing that. Telling a third person story, your own story, to talk about the potential success that you've had, rather than making a claim on what they will be potentially able to experience if they buy your product or service or anything like that. So just really be careful around those. And those are kind of the key things that kind of come through in terms of the common mistakes and where you'll get in a lot of trouble, especially if you get your ad account banned or business manager banned. I see it a lot. Again, also in the financial industry. So like using specific dollar amount figures. So you can't make a lot of claims, even when you're telling a story, talking about even your own story about how much money you made or things like that. Just being really careful on, all those things are going to be flagged by the AI. And talking about, like, even if you say like, oh, I made $7 million within this short period of time, it's something that can potentially be flagged, and usually will be flagged as you go about that. So again, just making it clear, not giving out the perception that, okay, I made $1 million in 2 or 3 years, you can too. Those are the kind of things that Facebook doesn't want on its network whatsoever. In terms of the landing page best practices, so again, it's all about that ad copy, but also the landing page. This is kind of where a lot of people get their ads rejected as well. So that page that you take people to, kind of limiting the amount of pop-ups that are there, content blockers, if there's tons of ads on that web page, if you're sending somebody to a website, those are all the things that Facebook is going to look out for and doesn't want that type of experience for their users. They want it to be really, really clean. They want to go to a landing page where you have that specific offer that is congruent with what the ad copy, said. They want the images really to go through. So again, the last one, really connecting the branding to the ad. So, if somebody comes to your landing page and they're really confused, like they clicked on this ad and it looks completely different in terms of the graphics, the images, maybe even the ad copy, and they have to, they immediately close the window, Facebook is going to be able to kind of track that. And that's going to kind of create that negative or confusing experience that Facebook doesn't want. They want really that congruency, making sure it's relevant. So it's kind of a seamless process between that ad that they clicked on and that landing page that they get to. So one of the key things that you should always do is try and tie up that images as much as possible. So the image that you use in that ad, make sure it's relevant to your offer as much as possible, but make sure that once you get to that landing page that, as much as possible, if you can, use a similar image or the same image so that when they get there, okay, they feel like they're in the right place. It's not confusing. They see somebody completely different. It doesn't create a lot of confusion. So, actually click through your ad, go to that landing page on your phone. That's where most of the people are clicking on their ads these days anyway. And make sure that there isn't something that kind of throws them off, or a headline that just doesn't make any sense based on that ad copy that you put together. So all those things are something that Facebook is taking a look at. And again, in that manual review process, especially in certain industries, they'll literally go line by line, especially in terms of that human review, and go line by line in terms of the copy that you're using, images, all those kind of things as well. The other thing is, with landing pages, they want to make sure that it's credible business. So a lot of times at the top, I'll make sure that there is a logo there. I'll make sure that the address of the business is up there. Make sure that there's a phone number. Making sure that there's a proper disclosures at the bottom as well. So you should have a link to your privacy policy. You should have a link to the terms of service. Anybody that clicks on that, those are kind of the classic things that you really need. And having all the relevant disclosures, especially if you're in the financial world or in certain industries, making sure that you have the disclosures at the bottom so it's crystal clear and there's lots of transparency about what your offer is, about your company, all those kind of things. So definitely take a look at your landing page, and if your ad does get rejected for, you'll see a couple of those compliance rules are kind of directly around. It doesn't, like they'll basically tell you in that rejection saying like, okay, your business doesn't seem credible. So try and add some of those things along the way. Make sure that your phone number at the top is something that is big and large. Make sure your address is there. Make sure that you're really building up within your landing page, that you are a credible business that people can reach out to if they have questions, all those kind of things. Because again, Facebook, the AI is looking at that, but also a human can be looking at that in the appeals process. So they want to be able to kind of do a Google search or pick up the phone and actually verify that you are a legitimate business as much as possible. So do those things, kind of take that extra effort to make sure that your disclaimers are there, all the links are there, and that you're kind of almost giving as much information as possible, so that again, there's no question about like what service you provide, people reaching out to you, asking questions, all those kind of things. And then in terms of images, so a few things, especially within the weight loss industry, but also dentistry, it's come about when I first started, no before and after images whatsoever. And it really goes down to like, again, those before images don't give a positive experience for their users. So, Facebook doesn't want any perceived like negative images whatsoever. And obviously with before and after kind of gets to the claims as well. They don't want one image kind of portraying and giving a claim of how somebody might be able to lose the weight or change around their teeth or anything like that in doing so. So no before and after images whatsoever, kind of regardless of what industry you're in. Nothing, again, this is something that has kind of become a little bit more strict as we've gone along. Nothing that's really sexually suggestive, scary, gory. So again, like nothing that kind of goes that way. Again, going back to kind of a negative experience. You don't want to again, you want to catch people's attention, but more in a positive type of light. You don't want to shock people where the image is so horrifying that they stop, but then they don't feel great about themselves. So again, always take it from Facebook wants to give all of its users a positive experience. So we want to make it really, we want to kind of avoid any of those shocking type things that might be perceived as negative, sexually suggestive. Again, we just want to kind of keep it almost as kosher as possible in terms of our images, our language, all those kind of things as well. The other thing in terms of use of logos, especially if you have like this kind of came about for me when I was doing video ads and I was doing some screen shares of my screen and kind of scrolling through. And I had some images in the background of other third-party companies. So making sure that if you have logos within either your image or your video, that they are ones that you own. So don't give, like if you have third-party logos in the background, what Facebook views is like maybe that's a partnership or they're support, like some kind of support by having your logo in the background. So as much as possible, try to avoid any kind of like outside logos or outside third-party companies, because again, Facebook will perceive that and will kind of, for your audience, it might be viewed as like, okay, this specific company is giving you a recommendation or backing or those kind of things. So just try to avoid as much as possible kind of logos in the background, and that will kind of protect you from your ads being rejected if they're not your own along the way. And then keep text to less than 20%. Facebook used to have like an image checker where this made it really easy. But again, within those images, Facebook doesn't want a lot of text, because in the normal Facebook posts, people they don't put a lot of text in those images. So as much as possible, Facebook wants those ads that you put out there to look like regular Facebook posts. They don't want their users going through and kind of just realizing they're kind of inundated with ads as much as possible. So keeping that text to a tiny amount of your ad, kind of limited as possible. It might be your logo at the very bottom that has some text in there, but as much as possible, not putting not overlaying any kind of text over your graphic to kind of viewing it as kind of like an extension of your ad copy altogether. So keep that in mind. A lot of times when you do that, when you have too much text within the image, you actually won't get your ad rejected, But what will happen is that Facebook will just, it'll cost it a lot more. It'll kind of penalize and show your ads to a lot less people. So you'll see that when you kind of view your ad performance, you'll see your CPM is going to be really high. So it's going to be, if CPM is usually around $25, you'll see yours at $50 or $100 or whatever it is. So Facebook is kind of like, without even telling you, kind of penalizing you and not showing it to the broadest audience or at the lowest cost that it would, really, because you're kind of using too much text within your image as much as possible. So again, those are kind of the ground rules and kind of thinking about that. Again, as I go through week by week, every single Wednesday, I'll focus on compliance. We'll dig a little bit deeper in terms of some landing page examples of what you can't say, specific words that I'm finding more and more aren't really working on Facebook and within certain industries, especially as I'm getting more and more stories of people, getting their ad account rejected and kind of figuring out the reasons why for that. I'll kind of share some of those things that are coming through, especially within weight loss, within financial, where it's happening more and more every day. So to keep yourself out of trouble, again, just recognizing what that ad approval process is like. Anytime you're putting your ad copy, you're editing your ad whatsoever, it's going to go through a process of going through an AI bot that's going to take a look at your ad and your images and your landing page, and recognizing that your landing page is part of the approval process as well. It might flag a certain things. It's going to be on the conservative side as much as possible. So if your ad does get rejected, that doesn't mean it's all said and done. You do have that manual review process where an actual human can take a look at that. But again, realize that if your ad does get rejected, there might be something potentially wrong. Like there's certain words, there's some kind of phrase that is flagging in the system. So just be aware of that and maybe make some modifications with the new ads that you put out there. And certainly as you're, like if you get several ads rejected, take a pause there, figure out and kind of put through a plain vanilla type ad and landing page so that your ad eventually does get approved. You don't want a lot of rejected ads within your ad account. That makes it more likely that your ad account is going to get shut down, because Facebook is kind of, Facebook, whether you know it or not, kind of has a score attached to your ad account. So if you're consistently kind of getting ads rejected or kind of going against their rules and their perception, that's where they're going to, shut down your business account, ad account, those kind of things. And with your business manager and ad account, there's the same process of kind of a manual human intervention. Again, just be really kind in terms of that appeal process, explain your kind of side of the story, and follow up as much as possible. And you should, if you kind of followed all the rules and recognize that a lot of that is happening more and more, where the AI is kind of shutting down accounts or rejecting ads, and it's not always because you did something wrong. So just recognize that and recognize that's probably going to happen more and more. And then in terms of the best practices, in terms of Facebook compliance, thinking about anytime you use the word "you" within your ad copy, making sure that you're not calling out the audience, with their personal characteristics, but also not attaching "you" to any type of claims. Again, use kind of more that indirect approach where you're using stories to address your audience and give them a better idea of what your solution is all about and how you could potentially help them. And then several things in terms of, just best practices in terms of images. No, don't use before and after pictures. Making sure it's relevant. Using your landing page, making sure that's congruent with your ad copy, and really just thinking about am I being directly calling out the audience here? Am I making claims that I'm really backing up along the way? And am I showing that I'm a credible business and a credible company, to the AI, but also to that person that might follow up with a manual review as well. And if you do those things, again, you could still fall into rejections and things like that. It all comes down to kind of recognizing what specific words and what specific phrases Facebook allows within your certain industry. And by running ads over time, you'll get a better sense of that. But again, the rules are kind of evolving day after day, week after week. So what is allowed today, certainly might not be allowed a few months from now, a few years from now, and don't look at other, don't look at your competitors' ads or peers' ads as like, okay, they're doing it, so it might be okay for me to do it. Eventually they'll get their ads rejected as well. So it's kind of an ongoing approval process. You can, even if you get that initial approval, that doesn't mean that your ads can't be disapproved and shut down in the future if you're not following the rules. And again, as the rules evolve, you have to take a look at your past ads and evolve those as well in terms of the language overall. So if you have any questions in terms of compliance, feel free in the comments below to ask any of those, anything that might be coming up. If you had any of your ads rejected for whatever reason, share some of those examples as well. If this was helpful, hit that like button, share it with anybody that might be having some compliance issues or running some ads at this time, so they have the rules of the road. And again, every Wednesday I'll revisit and get a lot more specific as we go in the weeks going forward. And if there's any specific areas that you want me to cover from a compliance perspective, let me know in the comments below as well. With that, I'll check out one of my lives tomorrow at 2:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Thanks.